Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Autodesk RepCap Pro and Reality Capture Solutions webinar. We're very excited to have you all here today. Matt, if you can jump to that next slide for me. Just some logistics to get out of the way here before we get started. All attendee lines will be muted throughout the presentation, but you can go ahead and send us questions via the chat box or the questions box throughout the presentation, and we will go ahead and answer those at the very end during our Q&A session. This webcast will be recorded and we'll be putting it both on our YouTube page and on our website a little bit later today. And those of you who are signed up and are here registered for the webinar will receive a video in your email later on today as well. And last but not least, any questions, concerns, anything of that nature, you can give us a call at 305-445-6480 or email us at info@dvscad.com. Okay, one more slide over, Matt. So we're very excited to have Matt Wunch here today from Autodesk to help us out with this presentation. So without further ado, Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give everyone the too long didn't read version of my profile, my background. I'm a solutions engineer here at Autodesk, been with the company 4 years, but started my journey in the AEC industry going way back to 1992. That was the old AutoCAD R10 DOS version, and throughout the those 30 some odd years, kind of pains me to say that, but I've had the opportunity of working for both horizontal, vertical firms as a CAD BIM technology manager. Of course, it wouldn't be an Autodesk presentation without the old safe harbor statement, basically saying don't make any purchasing decisions on anything you may hear or see in this presentation today. I don't think we're going to be talking about anything too forward-looking that isn't already publicly available on the roadmap, but just in case. I love starting out with this because typically when we talk about recap, we automatically think point clouds, right? This is not a point cloud, obviously. This is a three-dimensional mesh, and it was created with RepCap Photo, which is one of the solutions that we'll be talking about today. And our presentation here will talk about all the various flavors of reality capture solutions, what they are, what they do, how you can leverage them in your workflows. Here's our rough agenda here, talking about, again, the various solutions we offer. RepCap and Docs is going to be a big chunk of this, as will the workflows, and then we'll round it off with roadmap and then Q&A at the end. So let's just dive right into what is the difference between RepCap Pro, RepCap Photo, DeCap. Yeah, that does say DeCap. It is not a typo. I know a lot of people have never heard of DeCap, so we'll get into that. And then APS, our platform services, formerly known as Forge. Starting off with RepCap Pro, what is it? What does it do? How does it work? Well, simply put, it allows you to register multiple laser scans into that one structured data point cloud. And what we're looking at here is, those terrestrial laser scans, set them up on a tripod, go out to the site, the facility, scan the area, capture the points, capture the 360 photo. That is a single scan. We can register all of those in an automated process. And in the event that we don't quite have the coverage that we need, you are able to pick points on two similar scans. And you saw that a little bit earlier, kind of flashed through there, but I was picking points on a scan on the left, scan on the right. They don't have to be super exact as long as they're in the same kind of vicinity there. The algorithms will do its job and automatically make that distinction in the point clouds and make that connection to the two different scans. And it's important to point out structured data. Essentially, if your point cloud has that 360 photo attached to each of those scans, that is structured data. On the flip side is unstructured data. This could be a mesh point cloud created from a drone flight, or in this case, looking at the individual locations where I walked around this monument in Raleigh, North Carolina with my iPhone, snapping photos. This is RepCap Photo. This allows us to take those photographs, again, whether it's drone, iPhone, DSLR camera, doesn't matter, and then stitch them together, create a mesh, create a point cloud, create an orthotiff. Orthotiff, a little asterisk, if it's that aerial project. What is the difference really between the aerial versus the object project? Well, the aerial is tied into a coordinate system. It can be tied in using ground control points or just simply the GPS metadata inside of the photos from the drone capture. Keep in mind, if you rely strictly on the GPS data, it's not going to be as tight, as accurate. But in those instances where let's say you're going after a project, you don't want to sink a ton of time and money into that effort, that may be a perfectly acceptable solution. They do require tokens for processing, 1 token for 50 photos and 2,000 photos max for the aerial project, 300 for the object project. And again, this is unstructured data because we don't have those individual terrestrial scan setups around the site. Let's say you want to take our aerial capture and our terrestrial capture and combine them into a single point cloud to get that holistic view of that project site. So looking at the example on the screen here, we have the terrestrial scan on the outside of the building, we have the aerial capture, capturing the roof and more of the site. Pull those two together inside of RepCap Pro to get that holistic view, and you can see that process of picking points from one scan to another, like I mentioned earlier. Have to point out though, you do need at least one structured scan to combine the two here. So do make note of that. If you have 2 unstructured point clouds, it's not going to work. DeCap. So this is a command line version of RepCap Pro. So like that old DOS prompt that some of you may be familiar with way back in the day, it's basically the same thing. And we can use this prompt to register scans at scale. It's like that very first example of the point clouds, those terrestrial scans inside of RepCap Pro. You can do that same process inside of a command line, which can open up doors for automation and registering these scans at scale. As an example, a customer that I have worked with has some programmers on staff, and what they've basically done is kind of set up a folder or an application that listens to a folder. So when point cloud data, that raw scan data is dumped into that folder, they're prompted with things like what's the project name, the output folder, things of that nature, and it's automatically going through this process and creating that structured point cloud data for them. APS, the platform services, formerly known as Forge. On the flip side, we have this, which will allow us to take those photos, those aerial photos, and create that mesh file, the point cloud, the OBJ textured mesh, an FBX, our GeoTIFF, and a nice little report of the quality of, say, overlap of those photos, help identify any kind of gaps in that drone capture. This also requires tokens, just like before, 1 token for every 50 photos. And moving on to RepCap and Docs. So we can take those point clouds, those gigs and gigs and even terabytes, depending on the size of the capture, and host them in the Autodesk Construction Cloud and stream that point cloud through our browser. So we're not caching, we're not downloading gigs and gigs or terabytes of data. It is just simply streaming through that browser. And we have some very similar controls that we have in RepCap Pro in terms of elevation grading, kind of give us a sense of the highs and lows of that building, of that project site. We of course have those 360 photos as well. But what's really cool is we could start to do a little bit of kind of basic collaboration inside of the cloud here. And I'm adding a note to update the logo. And what we'll see in just a moment is that logo, those dimensions, any other notes that are added to this point cloud inside of the construction cloud viewer. That annotation, those notes, that graphic are also available on the desktop side. So I can kind of communicate with others who have the application, the desktop application, and help convey some of that intent. In this case, update that logo from the old logo to the new one, and here we are inside of RepCap Pro. All right, we can already see those notes, those dimensions popping up, and those are being pulled in from the cloud. Right, so it allows us to do a little back and forth communication, collaboration on the point clouds. A couple of updates in the 24 version. These are really kind of more like quality of life improvements. The lighting here just kind of makes it a little bit brighter on the right hand side compared to the older one on the left hand side, and that is that dome lighting toggle there. We could see that toggled on the right hand side. Again, just really kind of a quality of life thing. Just makes it a little bit easier to see that point cloud. Inside of the construction cloud for our point clouds, or for our point clouds, we have templates that we can configure, which allows us to extract information from our point cloud and then assign it to feature codes inside of Civil 3D. So going left to right, we have our point templates. These are going to be for things such as signs, trees, light poles, things of that nature. We can assign that feature code based on that particular object that we're trying to classify there, and it will be represented inside of Civil 3D with the correct block inside of that COGO point. In the middle, we have lines. So this is going to be for our linear feature extraction when we start using the cloud to automatically extract, say, curb lines, top of curb, back of curb, bottom, gutter, guardrails, barriers, things of that nature. And again, same thing, assign those feature codes. They're going to show up in Civil 3D as feature lines with the correct codes applied to them. And then there are 3D templates on the right-hand side. There is one sort of out of the box, if you will, for an ADA ramp, allowing us to capture the shape of that ramp. Those can be customized. You can create your own if you have unique areas that you typically want to capture. But they're, maybe they're not quite identical, so you can place it and then manipulate those points to extract that object for you. When we export this content, this data from the cloud, we can export as a DXF, land XML, or a CSV file. And again, pull that directly into Civil 3D and apply those feature codes. Just looking at some of the recent updates here, ground point classification. This will essentially separate your point cloud, all those ground related points, separate them from things such as the noise of the vehicles that were driving by as the laser happened to catch them. Separate the light poles and the vegetation, the buildings. So why is this important? We take this point cloud into Civil 3D, create a surface. We're using just those surface points, those ground points. All right, so we don't have to worry about any of the interpolation methods because all we have are the ground points. So a lot faster way of getting to that starting point of that surface inside of Civil 3D using that automatic ground point classification here. You can see that workflow inside of Civil taking that point cloud and running it through the process of creating a surface. And we'll just let this finish out here. There we go. We also have manual classification. So in the event, we've got some areas where maybe the automatic classification couldn't quite understand what was going on, or maybe we want to just grab a portion of the site as we're doing here. But it gives us that flexibility, that freedom of being a little bit more picky about what we choose to bring over to, say, civil in terms of that surface creation. And then sort of along those lines, we have intelligent decimation. And where this really comes into play is, we don't necessarily need all these points, right? We can strip this down, do a little bit more than what's already available in RepCap Pro. When you create that unified point cloud, there's the little toggle for the decimation. It goes up to like 100 millimeters. This allows us to decimate even more. We can also decimate just part of this. So let's say we have a massive site that's mostly flat, but running down the middle is a little bit of a gully and a winding river. Right? We can leave that internal portion there where the river is, keep that with a higher density of points so we get a more defined surface. But then on the outer edges where it's primarily flat, we can do some of that intelligent decimation and really kind of separating the two areas, right? Because the fact of the matter is we don't need this many points to create a surface, right? We want to create something that's accurate, but we also kind of want to straddle the line and not go over to the point where we create that MMS file. So intelligent decimation will help you kind of get to that point of just kind of on the fringe of creating that MMS file, but hopefully not creating it is the goal. So feature extraction, some of that template stuff that we saw earlier, right? This is all in the construction cloud. Again, streaming through our browser, not downloading anything. But here we're taking one of those templates and we are extracting that curb line. So we've got top of curb, back of curb, bottom of curb. Those tags that you see there, those could be, as you see, those feature codes can be applied to all of them. So when they come over into civil, they've got those right, those correct codes applied. But what's going to happen here is through machine learning, AI, it's going to follow that curb. We'll see those points automatically kind of jump to that point cloud as it traverses down this section of the road here. So it's going to keep those points in line with that point cloud. And as we get closer to the curve, we can then further refine that jump. So that jump isn't so far that it jumps out towards the road. We can maintain that curve. So we can do that on the fly and not have to start the process over again with another segment of feature extraction. The point feature, like I mentioned earlier, light poles, signs, things of that nature. And essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to pick a point that is on that object. And because it's the outside face of that pole, of that tree, of that sign, whatever it is, we have that ability in a top-down cross-section view there to kind of center that point, right? Because it's not going to automatically find the center line or the center of that group of points for us. It's just going to snap to the outside, and then we have to move it towards the center, at least for right now. We'll see if any advancements happen in that front in the future. There's the ADA ramp extraction that I mentioned earlier, placing that template down, but then being able to modify it, manipulate it, get it to fit that particular area with all its unique points and different elevations there. And again, being able to kick this out to that DXF, land XML, or CSV file. This is just one little example of, portion of the sidewalk. You may choose to use this in other areas as well, such as freeform extraction. So we've got a little bit of sidewalk, ADA ramp over here where there's our little detection strip there, but then also kind of grabbing part of that intersection as well. So giving you the different options depending on what you want to capture, how you want to capture it. And this is just showing that CSV export, and it's going to come across as your northing, easting, elevation, point number, description, familiar format that we're used to seeing inside of Civil 3D. Another one of those kind of quality of life improvements, just giving us a better glimpse of what is part of each of these scans. All right, so if we need to isolate one from the rest, we have a better idea of which one is the one that we want to focus on and which ones do we want to hide and isolate. So we kind of saw this earlier, bringing that surface into Civil 3D. I do apologize. The localization here, this comes from my French colleagues, so everything is in French, but I think we've all kind of seen this dialog box before, this workflow, but it allows us to bring that surface in, just those ground points, because we've already classified them from the rest of the noise or the rest of the stuff that's in the point cloud. And we can use that last option there because we don't have to interpolate those points because all we have is the ground points, right? So it's going to give you that more accurate representation of that surface. And then how can we use those point clouds in, say, AutoCAD? Well, there's something called section lines, and this is kind of, I'd say, a little bit misleading, but think of it as a section through that point cloud. In this case, we're looking at a top-down section, so basically like a floor plan. And I want to be able to create lines based on that point cloud to start to get a kind of a floor plan view of that point cloud. And depending on the density of the point cloud, openings, and it's kind of flipping back here real quick. There's a large opening here. There's another opening here. Actually, in this case, I think there was something blocking the view of the laser scan. So as it was capturing that data from wherever that scanner was set up, maybe somewhere over here, there's something in the way. So we didn't get the full scan of that portion of the wall. But depending on those factors, that's going to determine how well that line work comes across. And keep in mind, nothing's ever built perpendicular. There's always some variation. So play around with those settings and try to get something that's close but still workable, right? And that's the one thing we're really gonna have to focus on when we start talking about that scan to BIM or scan to design workflow. Is those laser scans are super accurate, but does it need to be super accurate in AutoCAD? Does it need to be super accurate in Revit? And we'll talk about Revit in just a moment, but kind of going way back with this particular video here, but this is really kind of the precursor to a lot of what we've just seen. This is an older video of that same point cloud that we've been looking at, that stretch of roadway inside of InfraWorks, but it does a lot of that automatic ground point classification, starts classifying the other objects in that point cloud and places some we'll call them placeholders, placeholder trees, cars, poles, things that it's been able to identify, gives us a starting point for our model. So we don't have to manually place all of these elements. But keep in mind, we do have to swap them out because it's just automatically grabbing something. And chances are it's not going to be exactly what we need. Here's some of that linear feature extraction that we saw earlier in the construction club. Again, this is inside of InfraWorks, going way back with a little bit more of the manual process here. We got to manipulate those points as we go from one station to the next. And then some more linear feature extraction of striping in the roads, but also being able to pick that information out and generate the surface inside of Civil 3D. So this is still available. If you haven't tried it and you want to, bring a point cloud into InfraWorks and start playing around with some of these capabilities here. Going back to that, one of those first images we saw of that mesh of the NASCAR race car. All right, we can take that mesh, we can bring it into InfraWorks, we can bring it into other solutions such as, say Revit or 3ds Max. Depends on where we need to take it. In this case, adding it to InfraWorks, helping to build out that model to tell that story of that particular project. Something else we can do is take that same mesh of that NASCAR and bring it into Forma. Probably wouldn't want to necessarily bring a race car into Forma. Probably want to bring something a little bit larger, but what we can do here though is use that mesh in context with the rest of the design, the rest of the project site here. And that mesh, when we send this model to Revit, that mesh is going to go along for the ride. So we're going to see that inside of Revit just a second here when we pull in that Forma design. And of course, through that iteration process, we can keep going back and forth between Forma, Revit, and have those other design elements, those other features. It could be that monument that we saw earlier, right? In this case, it's that car, but idea being is that mesh will travel from one solution to another. In this case, RepCap Photo to Forma, now into Revit. This is not part of the RepCap products, but I threw this in because I think it's worth pointing out here. This is point layout. This is really kind of more for the construction side and identifying points within our model, say hangars, and then translating that out in the field through, say, a total station, being able to identify and lay those out. But in this case, kind of going from that design as designed model to that laser scan as to what was actually designed, pulling those together inside of Revit, and then doing a little deviation analysis. How flat is that floor? How straight are those walls? Do we need to fill in any areas? Does everything kind of meet spec here? Is it flat enough? Is it not flat enough? So little analysis that we can do inside of Revit with our point clouds. And some of the solutions in the AEC collection. And you may be looking at this and saying, where's 3ds Max? Well, I purposely left that one out, focusing more on just the AEC specific solutions, but 3ds Max, yes, absolutely can handle those point clouds, those mesh files as well. And then heading down to our last section here, the roadmap. Again, this is all publicly available on our roadmap, but what are some of the things that the team is looking at? They're looking at, similar to that linear feature extraction, but rail extraction, not as widely used in the States here in terms of the transportation rail design, but certainly one of those things that is very important throughout the rest of the world. You may have heard of Point Fuse and our recent acquisition going was back in end of March timeframe. We acquired Point Fuse and their IP and tech. And Point Fuse essentially allows us to take a point cloud and create a segmented 3D mesh. And what exactly does that mean? Well, there's a video here of Point Fuse's current capability, and we have that segmented mesh, and we see some of the air handling system here, the ductwork and the diffusers and everything. You see how everything is color coded. Everything is kind of a block, for lack of better word, but it allows us to separate, and in this case, remove some elements that we don't need, right? If we're trying to create an existing conditions model of a building, let's isolate the elements that are important, such as the floors, the walls, doors, windows. Get rid of those tables and chairs that we saw just a moment ago and make it easier to work with what we need when we need it. Again, this is current capability and kind of looking forward here. What I can say is, again, this is a recent acquisition, but the product team is looking at how do they roll this into RepCap Pro. I will also say that keep your eyes out if you're going to Autodesk University in San Diego in October. There's going to be some announcements there in terms of the product, where they are, possible beta stuff as well. So at this moment, not much to report, but just do know that big things are coming with our reality capture solutions. So kind of give you a little overview of what solutions we have, what you can do with them, but to give you some more ideas, it's not just AEC. If you cross the line into manufacturing, the digital factory, absolutely perfect use case for that as well. Video game assets, movies and TV, and so many more things that I just couldn't fit on here. But they just want to kind of throw this out as a, what's possible type of situation here. So would love to hear from you all at the end of this, what you guys are using reality capture for. And with that, I'm gonna end with the Q&A, and hopefully we've got some questions that came in, Alan.
All right, awesome. So I have a couple that have come in. If anybody does have any additional questions, please do send those over in the questions box or the chat box, and we'll get to those shortly. Okay, so the first one, how do I install DeCap?
Oh, DeCap, the old command line version there. Very simply, you install RepCap, and DeCap basically goes along for the ride. There's a help article, and I wish I had the link in here, but I can send that out to the DDS CAD team, and they can maybe include it with the link to the recording. But essentially, you're just gonna connect to that RepCap license through the command line, through that DeCap exe. So nothing to install, it's installed automatically, and just gotta set up that text with all the correct parameters and what you want to do, and you're off to the races.
Okay, perfect. Next one I had here, you mentioned the meshes. Can those be manipulated in any way?
So yeah, actually, so those 3D meshes that were created with say recap photo, for example, or even if it's like an FBX file that you get from somebody that you want to pull in to any of your models, recap photo will allow you to manipulate, modify, sculpt, stretch, fill holes, things of that nature. A lot of people don't know that, but there are some tools inside of recap photo on the left-hand side, the little flyout, that allow you to do some of that mesh manipulation without having to bring that into something like, say 3ds Max, which if you've ever used 3ds Max, you can understand that it's a little intimidating, we'll say, with all the menus and pull downs and toolbars and things like that. But yes, you can do some manipulation of meshes inside of recap photo. Again, doesn't have to be something that was generated with recap photo. Could be that FBX file that you got from somebody, or you found it on some website and you want to bring it in, or it's an OBJ, and then you can export that to a number of file formats as well after you make those modifications that manipulate that mesh.
Okay, perfect. I have one more here, but anybody else who wants to send a question, please go ahead and do that. Can ReCap create multiple levels of detail for 3D models to optimize performance and storage?
Not levels of detail in the sense of like a BIM model, like the LOD 1, 2, 3, 400. But like what you saw earlier with the some of that classification and decimation, we can kind of chunk it up, decimate certain areas so it makes that point cloud a little bit later, a little bit easier to use. So not exactly a level of detail, but it allows you to really kind of strip out some of the stuff that you don't need. Some of that noise of the guy walking his dog as he was walking past the scanner, or those trees 300 meters off in the distance that are outside of our project site. Just being able to do some kind of cleanup like that. In terms of storage, once you start kind of chunking down that point cloud into those more sort of bite-sized, more manageable pieces, I like to refer to it really as breaking it apart into what's important to you for your part of the job. So if I'm working on, say, walls, for example, of an existing building, I just want the walls. I don't need all the other stuff in there. All right, so optimizing it, making it smaller, putting those point clouds in the construction cloud so you don't have to put them on an external drive, which this is a story, something that happened to me when I was still in industry. At the time, we had external drives for the point clouds because the IT folks didn't want to put anything on the server because it was just massive in size. And we didn't have construction cloud back then. So they put them on an external drive. Somebody throws it in his desk, locks his desk, goes on vacation, and we're kind of dead in the water till the guy gets back with his key and can unlock his desk for us. So manipulate those point clouds, decimate them, put them in the construction cloud. Everyone who has access to the project has access to those point clouds.
All right, perfect. The last question I have here is ReCap included with the AEC collection?
It is, yes. ReCap is included. ReCap Photo also included. ReCap Photo will install when you install ReCap Pro. The point, we'll call it the point cloud version versus the photo version. Currently, they are two separate installs. For the safe harbor statement image in your minds, product team is looking at kind of consolidating that, so we don't have two separate solutions, two separate installs. Again, we'll see if that comes to fruition. Don't make any buying purchases based on what I just said. But yeah, currently two separate installs, two solutions, two different kind of workflows, but included with the AEC collection.
All right, perfect. So that's it on the questions for now. If anybody thinks of anything later, you can always reach out to us here and we can get those answers from Matt. So thank you all so much for attending, for spending a little time with us here today. Thank you, Matt, for the awesome presentation. Do be on the lookout for future webinars from us. You can always find those on our website, or if you're subscribed to our mailing list, you should receive those emails as well. Again, as I mentioned previously, if you need us, need to contact us, you can always do that at 305-445-6480 or email us at info@ddscad.com. Again, regarding any questions, information you need regarding training, support, software pricing, anything of that nature, you know where to find us. Okay, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.